All right, so this is Frank Yosa, KetoneAid, and I've got Doug here, a longtime customer. He sent me a text message, and actually, Doug, I'll let you tell me, what did the text message say, and then I said, hey, let me do this on Zoom. Let me answer your question on Zoom so that other people can enjoy and participate.
I appreciate that. I'm sure other people have a similar mindset, very analytical, very scientific. I love to get into nuts and bolts and off into the weeds of all the specifics of it. I've been using KE4 specifically for several years now. Bottle a day, strict carnivore diet, keto diet, very well versed in all that stuff. Sure, I'm not the only one to have I didn't want to call it a complaint, but its stuff is very expensive. And I've seen some other reviews on that too. Oh, if I had, win the lottery, I'd use this more often. I do consume it regularly every day. I have a high energy demanding job, so it helps fill in a lot of those gaps when needed. But because of the cost, I've started to explore other products. I don't necessarily want to call them out specifically, but
Yeah. Let's go ahead and call them out. I mean,
even from an ingredient list, someone could find that anyway.
Yeah.
But the newest one from HVMN, is it?
Yeah, HVMN. It's called Ketone IQ. Yeah.
Ketone IQ. And I noticed right off the bat just the difference. I'm an ingredient geek, from everything, supplements, food, all that kind of stuff. But I noticed the simple difference of R13 butanediol. I'm like, okay, I didn't know any difference in that. But even taking the recommended dose, I was like off in a coma for hours. I mean, it was like fairly pleasant, but not what I wanted at the time. It's not what I was wanting to experience first thing in the morning to get a boost of energy. I'm like, well, maybe it was just too much. Even at lesser doses, it was just less of a undesirable effect, so to speak. So phased that one out, never took it again. I chucked it. And then several months went by, and I was Google searching for other stuff, and I found a company called Kenetik. And right off the bat, I noticed their ingredient list had that quintessential missing ingredient of DBHB slash, but then it was R13 butanediol yet again. I tried searching myself on some scientific papers. I know from like amino acids, there's like, I forget those denotations, but like the R and D, I kind of saw that they say it's like the left or right form, or I don't know if it really quite mattered that much as far
Not
as
exactly, but we'll get into that.
Okay. For sure. I could not find a definitive answer. That was the biggest thing. My user experience, though, absolutely provides a definitive answer for myself, because I'm like, when I take the R form or the D form, there's a night and day difference. I mean,
not exactly. It's not what you think. It's not what you think.
Okay.
So why don't we go into it? So the Kenetik product is a simple mixture of D-beta hydroxybutyrate and D13-butanediol. Now, here's the confusing part. D and R are the same. So it's the S and the L that are the bad ones. So sometimes for certain supplements, it's D-ribose or L-tryptophan. It's kind of like the UK system compared to like, UK meters versus yards. It's that type of thing. The R and the D form are the same. So on our ketone ester, we say D-beta hydroxybutyrate, D13-butanediol. We could have just as easily put D-beta hydroxybutyrate, R13-butanediol, which is actually kind of hyper-technically more correct to say R13-butanediol. And when we came out with our drink that was just R13-butanediol, and I wanted to call it R13, calling it D13 just didn't sound as catchy. So we went with R13. So I'll try and make it more clear on the bottling. I'll probably go back and change that. The D and the R are the same. Now, the key difference in the Kenetik version is they simply poured D-beta hydroxybutyrate and D or R13-butanediol together, as opposed to the ester bond. And you're asking me, where is the magic? There
you go.
So tell me how the Kenetik felt, and then ultimately, you said you came back.
The Kenetik felt it was almost like an in between, but still too sedative. And I even did some math, and it's relatively simple math, but because their ratios are different and how many grams of ketones are in the liquid, there's just more of it. So I'm like, I took a full serving and I had this kind of same effect. It was like I was like energized sort of, but too highly sedated.
Yeah.
Again, I'm at work, or in the morning, like I didn't want that.
So that's why we came out with this drink, which is highly sedative, and we sell it as an ethanol-free alcohol. Those two companies use this same ingredient. One uses it by itself, the HVMN. They just use R13-butanediol. So let's talk about them for a second. They used to have the ketone ester. They got
Right.
$6 million government contract, and it'll be on their website. It says $6 million government contract. But the government contract was for the ketone ester, not for their new and improved 2.0. Well, they lost their license for the ketone ester. So then they had to go around looking for the next best thing that would raise ketone levels. And they do what I call science hijacking. They say, oh, this ketone ester paper says that the athletes were at 2 millimolar. We can get you to 2 millimolar. Therefore, the result is the same. And as you experienced, it's not the same.
Yeah,
Your BHB,
it's a dramatic difference.
your blood level BHB might be the same, but it's not the same. And I even went to a metabolic health summit where it was an entire 1 or 2 hour presentation on ketone ester for hypoxia in the government trial. And then at the end, it was sponsored by HVMN, and they kind of try to make this transition to, during this time, we discovered that it tasted really bad. So we came out with this 2.0 version. And then I stood up and I asked a question to the researchers, not the people working for the company. Can you just imply a benefit of one because the ketone levels rise the same as another product? And they said, absolutely not. So that's science hijacking. So the other company, Kenetik, does that as well. They say, backed by science on their big, all 100% of the science is ketone ester. So what they did is they just poured the D-beta hydroxybutyrate and R13-butanediol into a pot, and they didn't esterify it. So that's the key. You're wondering, well, if it's the same ingredient, why isn't it? Why isn't it the same thing?
That's why it's so deceiving, because you look at the ingredient list and it's DBHB slash, R.
I don't know if they put a slash. They might put a comma, and there might be a slight nuance there where the slash means like in science kind of means an ester bond, and we use the word ester. So the ester is the bond of the two ingredients separately. And here's what happens. So in the drug world, they make things into an ester form in order to increase penetration into the bloodstream. Okay, so it gets into the bloodstream differently. And recently, another paper, well, you should try it. There's another ketone ester if you haven't tried it. Here I am telling you, if you want to try them all, go ahead. It's called Juvenescence Labs. It's called Juvenescence Labs. It is an ester, but it is, instead of C8, it's C6, like a MCT oil, C6 bonded to R13-butanediol. So you can try that as well. I will warn you that it might cost half as much on a cost per gram basis, but they recommend that you have to take it with food. So, but if you're using it to help your fasting, it kind of that doesn't work. If you're using it to help your fasting or extend the fast or not eat,
since all
so you should try that.
What about that Deltag? They seem to be like the only other company that kind of makes it the exact same way.
Theirs would be fine,
but maybe they're not made in America or something.
No, there's not made in America. So
Hawaii.
You're asking about plant-based. Ours is 100% plant-based. That is actually a good thing. Theirs is 50% plant-based. Ours is made in the US. Theirs is made, I believe, in the UK.
The other 50%, it's a petroleum-based? Is that how it's sourced? Okay.
Yeah. So that product is fine. The only thing you have to watch out for is they sell their main version. It's kind of confusing. The ingredient they call Deltag, but then one of their SKUs they call Deltag. So the blue bottle, they call that Deltag, but then the other drinks have Deltag in it. So it's kind of confusing, but it has 3 grams of sugar in the blue bottle.
Right. That's why I noticed that. They sell the black one that's just pure. I'm like, I don't know what that would taste like though.
If you want just pure, you could do that. I don't think it costs any less. And their product is fine, but a lot of the clinical trials actually had to switch over to our product because they were trying to compare glucose versus ketones. And it's only 10% versus 30 grams of or 25 grams of ester and 3 grams of sugar, so it shouldn't matter. But if you're doing a clinical trial on ketone ester, you're going to want just the ketone ester, not this extra 3 grams of sugar. I even told one researcher, and she was like, no, this can't be. We just spent $100,000 on all these MRIs. And she ran over to the bottle. She's like, oh my God, it has 3 grams of sugar. Like, I didn't know that. So so their product has 3 grams of sugar. So I wish that the D and the R form were, it was a little bit more clear. Maybe I can put D parentheses R, find a way to put it in there to kind of let people know that it's the same. But the key thing is that it's an ester bond. So that other company, Juvenescence Labs, they did a comparison on penetration of ketones into the bloodstream. So they compared their C6 1,3-butanediol, R1,3-butanediol ester, and they found that the ketone ester, what we call the Veach ketone ester. So Dr. Veach is where this right here, the book Ketones, the Fourth Fuel, Dr. Veach, that was my wife's godfather. That's how I got started in all of this. They found that the ketone ester actually entered into the bloodstream as a ketone ester. So drug companies will increase delivery of certain drugs by making it into an ester form, and somehow, and I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, it actually helps penetrate into the bloodstream. So that's why you're feeling the difference. If you just pour the two ingredients in, it's a much cheaper to develop. We could do that right now, not make that ester bond. That ester bond, you lose a lot of material, a lot of time, a lot of energy. Oh my God, it'd be easy. Just pour two ingredients.
It sounds like a similar thing. Just a few weeks ago, I started taking magnesium L-threonate. Probably a similar mechanism to a degree, right? Because it crosses the blood-brain barrier when it's bonded to that threonic acid.
Yep. And the L form just means
don't do that.
So certain supplements, the L form is what's bioavailable. It's what the body can see, the L form. And sometimes it's the D form. So it's not like the D is always better than the L. It's just certain molecules. The D form is what is bioactive, and sometimes it's the L form, like L-tryptophan. You would never go and buy D-tryptophan. You buy L-tryptophan. So there's certain ones. So the backstory real quick on the R13 is I asked Dr. Veach, with the R13-butanediol, when it enters into your system, 80% of it goes into your bloodstream and converts to D or R beta hydroxybutyrate. So I said to him, why this expense of making this bond if you can just deliver maybe 20% more of the R13-butanediol? Why not just do that? And his answer was epic. He said, the mice were stumbling. So the mice were drunk, and you just finished saying how you felt sedated. That's, the mice.
I tried to go for a walk around the block with my kid and dog, and I could barely make it.
Yeah. So, I mean, different people will have different effects, obviously. Different people, different tolerability to, but we market it as an alcohol. They market it as a ketone ester killer replacement. And it's just like, and all the science on their website points to ketone ester papers. And the only two papers that used 1,3-butanediol for sports performance showed, negative effect. And the side effects were nausea, euphoria, and just basically the athletes were drunk. And they recommend 2 to 3 servings. You took 1 serving. They recommend 2 to 3 servings. Get on a bicycle and go down a Tour de France 60 miles per hour down hills. I mean, someone's going to get.
I could see an element for recovery. You're laying on the couch for a few hours, or maybe even sleep. Same thing. I know people have talked about, well, hey, how does your product help sleep when it's supposed to wake you up? And like you mentioned, I've taken a capful before bed with magical results. It works.
Yeah.
On those real low doses. So I could see an avenue for that. And to their credit, they don't advertise it as an ester. I noticed that right away.
Oh, but even with the Kenetik, if you search for ketone ester, they bought the phrases, and they
that's
it's
a problem.
A little bit misleading.
You're right. But as far as on their bottle, they don't say that.
They don't say that. But
delicious ketones. It just says ketones. So there's no ester.
They've had multiple podcasts where the host calls it a ketone ester multiple times, and the person that they're interviewing doesn't correct them. So they allow that misinformation to go out there.
I saw that recently on a review of the Ketone IQ, and I'm like, hey, you can't call it that.
Yeah, so it's not ketone ester. They don't correct people when it's wrong.
That's fascinating.
So that's what we're doing. So the R13-butanediol, 5 years ago, I said, I think some humans might want that, to get a little bit of a buzz. So I filed a patent on that 4 or 5 years ago. And then finally last year, we launched that as an after work drink. But this can has 12.5 grams of the R13. This, I don't know if you've tried that, the new ketone water has 3 grams. So 12.5 and 3, it's not like the one is 4 times stronger. It's just different. It's just a different feeling, but you need much, much less of the ester. So, they try to claim whether 60, 80% price reduction per ketone per gram. Yeah, but it's less effective and doesn't do anything. It doesn't do the same thing. And you don't want to be taking that stuff before a final exam.
And that's what I found very fascinating, because when I broke down to, it came out to approximately 15 milliliters of Kenetik for the supposed amount of ketones that you're getting, the grams of ketones per 1 capful of KE4. So it's about 3 grams of active ketones. Night and day difference of how I felt, though. That's what was wild. I'm like, 3 grams of ketones here, 3 grams of ketones there. Supposedly DBHB, supposedly R13-but it's a
Yeah, so only
That's a
time will
phenomenal
tell, but
difference. So,
I'm not good enough of a marketer. I don't have venture capital backing to have a product that's inferior
hey,
and that
it
you just
speaks
put a
for
bunch of money
itself, though.
behind it.
That's
So, and we do try to help people like you understand different ways to take it to try to be more economical so you can spend less. But you found what works with for you after years. But yeah, so thank you so much for giving me the time. Do you have any other questions that I didn't clear up on that text message? That I think I replied to you within 5 minutes. Actually, I could be wrong. Maybe it was earlier today. To your
no,
text message
it was
saying,
within. I would say probably within 30. Very
okay,
reasonable. I would
yeah.
expect just the fact you have that on your box is quite amusing. I've been wanting to send a text or something for even just a shout out to be like, "Hey, man, great product." Just as simple as that. But no, I mean, honestly, that clears it up gratefully.
You might really
Um,
like that because you've been drinking one capful every few hours. You might really love this because this is, instead of one capful being 2.5 grams of ester, this is 3 grams of ester. So I just put a little bit more because it's got the volume, so you'll be slow releasing it more. You could be
is that
taking
does that
these.
ketone water
Yeah,
have the ester too? So it's
yeah.
not just the R13 like the hard ketone.
It's no, exactly. This is the
Right. Okay.
ketone ester. Uh, as far as how does it taste, if you had 10 different sparkling waters in front of you, ours would probably taste better than 2 of them. So we're not gonna.
Right.
It's got a ketone ester in it, so it's not gonna taste as good as whatever you like, Waterloo,
Well,
LaCroix. But the
what's
idea is to be in that genre.
right. What's hilarious is people want to talk about the taste. I look forward to that
Oh
taste.
yeah,
My brain has been programmed
yeah.
to that taste hits your mouth, your throat, and get you like, there we go. Like it's almost an immediate effect. I guess to end on one caveat to all this, why cherry? Where did
Oh
that come from?
yeah.
Why
So
it tastes like Robitussin, bro?
we
What
call it
about a
very
lemon lime?
we call it very scary cherry because a few reasons. People have a perceived concept of, you said Robitussin, they think medicine, so they
Right.
have this expectation of a bad taste. It's already going to taste bad. So we want you to have it. We want you to recognize a bad cherry flavor that you've had in the past. You've never had a bad lemon lime in the past, and it would just be horrible lemon lime. So we did that cherry to connect
Interesting.
with
Okay.
that
Okay.
the 1980s
Because
cough
whoever
syrup
said
medicine.
Robitussin
Yeah,
tasted good? No
yeah,
one, right?
yeah.
They're like, just
But
medicine
but
good
the
in.
but the black cherry that we have in the ketone water, so we have an orange vanilla, we now have a black cherry. That one tastes really yummy.
Okay, so I didn't know that difference. I was looking on your website recently, and I saw the hard ketones and the ketone water, but I didn't know there was that difference in
It's
there.
a little
Because
confusing, and we'll try better.
I also love a Perrier. You know how many times I've taken a cat full of KE4 and then chugged it with like a strawberry Perrier?
Oh, there you
We're
go.
basically
Yeah, yeah,
making that, right?
yeah,
So to have that convenience, it's all in a one thing, and load up the Yeti with some ice, and
yeah. And then you
that's
mentioned
cool.
the
That goes to
R13
show.
after working out. Yeah, it's a great way to get your ketones up and relax, as opposed to having a beer after a race or one of those
Right.
tough mudder type races where they all have beer afterward and it destroys your recovery. Yeah, it's great for that. And anytime you might regularly have regular alcohol, anytime you would have alcohol, replace it for the R13. That works really well as
Yeah, I
well.
quit drinking 10 years ago, so
All
it's
right,
all good.
great.
Well, I appreciate the time, man. That's just a phenomenal. I know I love the marketing advertising you can do with that people can see the actual face of a company. It's not just you're not just a rep out there shooting documents and words and stuff out. I mean, you really seem like you understand it, live it, breathe it. I just want to spread that word. Obviously, with anything, I'd love to see the cost come down, not only just for myself, but to be able to help more people afford it and be able to utilize it would be the coolest thing. So,
For
but
whatever it's worth, we really
um,
don't have sales. You might have noticed that. And once we were able to bring the price down, we actually did do a 5% price drop across the board, as opposed to having these sporadic 10%, 20% off sales. So,
I just got five
we're
percent off
trying.
this morning on Amazon. I just ordered some more bottles. So,
All right.
yeah, good deal.
All right. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Sorry, you just said, first of all, that you bought it on Amazon. I was explaining that it's actually a lot less expensive if you buy it directly, because you can buy the bulk and then the subscription.
Right.
Five would be like 25% less. But you started telling a funny story, and I said, let's turn on the
But no,
video.
I was saying I had for years prior, for many years, I've been using ketone salts. That really helped my adaptation 5, 6 years ago into a keto carnivore diet. Come to find out, it's most likely just the salt load. One thing it dramatically did after a little, the magnesium is a nightmare. It'll give you the trots for
Yeah.
sure. And the calcium, heart palpitations, anxiety. I'm getting way too much calcium I ever need. not to necessarily plug someone else's company, but if you're familiar with Element, I've been following Rob Wolf for many, many years. And when they finally dropped that, I'm like, oh, that stuff is an absolute godsend for keto, carnivore. I'd sweat a lot, all that kind of, but minus the high magnesium and ketone salt load.
Yeah, they're very high in sodium, but the ketone salt companies know that sodium is what people look at and they go, oh, too high sodium. So then they call it reduced salt, and they just push the salts into the other salts, potassium, magnesium, and calcium.
But I also follow Peter Attia, and I'd read an article from him years ago talking about the ketone esters, another podcast and people that Ben Greenfield talks about the esters, these things like it's pure rocket fuel. I'm like, man, what is that? Right. I was always very curious to try it, but the cost, I was afraid to try because I knew I'd like it. I'm like, this stuff has to work. These are high performing elite people, and there's reason for that. And I went ahead and bit the bullet one time because those ketone salts were just wrecking my gut. They kind of worked, but not really the amount you have to take. And from day one, a little over 3 years ago, every day I was sold on that KE4. I'm like, this stuff is, I love the microdosing to it, and if I need salt, I can take salt, but it's separated.
Well, yeah. So the funny thing is,
meter the dose either way you want. So
the funny thing is, people have this perception that the KE4 costs more, but it's actually costs less on a per gram basis and actually per effective gram basis because the ester bond gets into the bloodstream versus all of the higher quality DBHB salts. It's actually costs less per gram. But the fact that you can take 5-10 times more of it, it's not my fault that you can take more of it, but on a per gram basis, it's actually a lot less expensive than many of the ketone salts. So
I've noticed a lot of times too, I typically take 1 capsule every hour. It's kind of like the sweet spot. I can feel it come in. It's not too much. It's not too little. And I'll do that, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours throughout the day, maybe a few more after I eat, later lunch or something. I've also noticed that I sometimes don't even need that much. Just a half capsule really can
half capsule,
get the job done. Maybe 1 or something to start, and then like a half to maintain.
Yep.
So
it has a cumulative effect. It has a cumulative effect. Really absolutely. So you can add it to that water bottle, and just walk around with that water bottle and slowly drink it throughout the day.
That's an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. Is there any dilution ratio that would be too much?
No.
Because I sometimes fear that. I love green tea. I drink these big bottles of Teyava. And I'm afraid sometimes if I take 1 or 2 capfuls and then I chug like almost a whole liter of tea, am I diluting it too much that it's not going to work as good?
I actually had to do a mini, it's not a clinical trial, but an N of 1 where I had to drink, I think it was a full liter with 5 grams of active ketones in it, a full liter of water to track the ketone levels, and they were the same. So water doesn't affect it.
Okay,
but you mentioned green tea. You got to watch out for that because it has caffeine. The ketones will multiply that caffeine. And you might think that what you're feeling is the ketones, but it's actually the ketones delivering the caffeine. So really,
I have noticed that it's like almost like a multiplier of sorts, which is good because then I feel like I don't need as much caffeine.
Yeah, but here's the problem: people think that it's a buy one get one free. They think that they're buying 1 cup of coffee and getting the equivalent of 2. But what it does is it delivers twice the caffeine, and caffeine is a stimulant, so it skyrockets you twice as high, which then will lead to twice the fall. So it's if anything, I would actually suggest trying to use the ketones to get off of the caffeine, because what caffeine does is it doesn't actually give you real energy. It blocks the perception of fatigue. So if you have any fatigue in your system, it blocks that. You're still fatigued, but it blocks your knowing that you're fatigued. So it thinks that you have energy, but then when that stuff wears out, that fatigue is you're going to crash even more. So if you want, sustained energy, even if you take it only 1 cup in the morning, I'm anti-caffeine, and maybe one day we're going to have a decaf coffee that is just ketone ester and decaf coffee to help people.
Or what about a decaf green tea? Because there's still lots of other benefits
sure.
in green tea.
Decaf,
theanine, all the ECGCs and all that other fun stuff, and it just tastes good.
Yeah.
But that's why I love. I do the Teyava Hojicha green tea. It's roasted, fantastic flavor, and it's low caffeine.
Okay, great.
I've gotten out of the years past. I used to do all the pre-workouts and the insane slamming monsters all day. So if anything, green tea and ketone esters have gotten me off of all that other high-powered stimulants.
And did you ever try the other drink? I don't have one with the label on it. The snake water drink.
I have not. It's very intriguing.
So some people that
I've taken separately over the years, and you kind of just put it all in one. So
So it's when people go from the KE4 or or the KE1 as like an introduction because it tastes better. Then they move to the KE4 once they see that it works. But then they go to the snake water, which has all these other ingredients built into it. And oftentimes they don't come back because on a cost per gram basis, it's just maybe 10% more on the ketone ester side, but then, has 15, 20 other nootropics and actives. So some people have found a way to, use the snake water during certain tasks or certain times of the day, and then switch to the KE4. So let's get you some of those to try out and see how that compares.
Be phenomenal.
Yeah,
one other question, and I know it mentions on your bottle, but what's your take on dosing it with glucose? Obviously, I would assume it's a dextrose, so your liver doesn't metabolize the fructose and go through that whole process. But is there any type? I know everyone's different depending on what you're doing and all the kind of things. But what type of even potential protocol? 5, 10 grams of dextrose, 20?
So you mean
how much ester with it?
So you mean
at the exact same time, separated?
So you're talking about dual fuel, having this.
Yes.
So it's a very sexy concept, this dual fuel. Oh, you got the ketones and you got the glucose. I'm not a fan of it. So, and I was just talking about the snake water. What we did actually put in the snake water was a 1-to-1 ratio of ketones to isomaltulose, which is a slow release sugar that won't give you a blood sugar spike, but give you some extra baseline. And also some people, when they take too much ketones, their blood sugar drops too much and they get lightheaded. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a baseline. As far as mixing the two, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't see a scenario.
And, I don't like it. I've tried it a few times and I don't like it. I'm like, there's what I have found is maybe do some ketone esters, let them kind of absorb or even clear out a few hours. And if I need dextrose, 10, 20 grams, doesn't take a whole ton, let that absorb in for an hour and then maybe go back to an ester. It seems to be a more biologically normal.
Try playing with the
that'd be good to have like high insulin and isn't that like ketoacidosis? Like,
no, ketoacidosis is just is where your body is not able to get rid of ketones. So it's cumulative. It just goes up and up, up and up. But you could buy the isomaltulose separately online on Amazon and try that instead of your glucose. And you can also try UCAN.
Okay.
UCAN is a
slow
my next
question.
starch.
Thank you for saying that.
But their recommended serving size is 30 grams though. You might be fine with like 5. Like you just want like a little bit of a pop, especially if you're keto, you're carnivore, you might react much more to it. If you go ahead and put in the entire 30, I have this theory that it kind of blocks the ketone utilization
too much.
So, so you might try to play with that slow carb.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another great bit of info.